Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So thanks for coming, Alvin. So Alvin, like I just mentioned, he's actually here from China, and he just flew in from Shanghai. 45 minutes to the airport, 45 minutes flight, and 45 minutes to this location from the airport is how I convinced him to come and speak here.
I actually told June, and I actually asked him whether is it possible to come in December, because I had a conference that ended yesterday, and I had to actually fly. I flew back from Hainan Island, right, back to Shanghai 11 p.m. and actually got up with my family right at 5 a.m. this morning to fly here.
Thank you.
And you owe me a big one.
I do owe you a big one. So, so we were having dinner, and that's how we actually started. So, he's actually the CEO of Omnicom. And also, I think you're also co-founding a company at the same time, in which we'll talk about it a little bit at Boost, right? And here's Alvin here to talk to us about the Chinese market and whatnot. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end for you to be able to ask about expansion in Korea as well, if we haven't addressed it before, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So first, I think we just Omnicom and at Boost.
Okay.
So are you running both of them at the same time right now?
I wish I could.
Okay.
I wish I could. Well, AppBoost is a company that I actually started. In fact, I started the company just after coming out from Google.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually not too long ago. It was, I think to be exact, some 17, 18 months ago, where I saw an opportunity as a result of actually working for Google. There was an opportunity to get into a space where I was already very familiar, called performance-based marketing. So it was actually with sufficient hindsight, right, that I had the opportunity to come to actually create a model with a few Googlers, right, and jump into a space there that we were helping a lot of Chinese app developers, right, targeting a lot of people develop apps in China. A lot of them are actually targeting global markets. So we took that opportunity and created a company, right, and then we help these companies to target any of the markets outside China. And we do that very well because we have access to lots of insight and data from where we came from. So that was actually the company that, but I am not the person who runs it on a day-to-day like you, how you would run your company. So I had a couple of team of people that's doing it. And my full-time role is actually I advise a lot of Omnicom clients. So we have like 66 blue chip clients that you probably have heard of, like Apple, Estee Lauder, companies like McDonald's. So
Samsung.
Yes. Samsung, unfortunately, we don't do them because they have their own agency.
What a shame. Yeah. Samsung guys, listen up.
So we help a lot of these companies, right, to address an area that is very exciting, which is actually mobile, because mobile is growing so fast, right, but our clients are really far behind. The acceleration is actually on the user side, not on the client side. So client knows a lot about mobile. They themselves know a lot about mobile, but at the same time, they put only a small percentage of their money on mobile. Mm-hmm. So effectively, right, most of the time they don't spend on mobile. So I actually don't run AppBoost on a day-to-day, though we have a team of people that we meet on a regular basis. But my full-time role is actually this. I also sit as a mentor and advisor a few startups in China, mm-hmm. Which I am. I've always been a startup fan because I actually startup before I even worked for big companies. So as a result of that, right, I don't have as much energy as you do because I'm no longer as young as you do, right? As much as I would love to. So I spend a lot of time, right, helping companies, right, helping young founders, right, who has got so much energy that I wish I still have that energy, but realizing that I don't have enough, I will then leverage people who have sufficient energy to drive the business, and then I will help them by providing inputs and all the whatever necessary channels that I could share with them, right? I mean, this is business, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, right, you can build so much, but you also need multiple channels to help me, and that's what I do.
Great. So I mean, you're actually helping a lot of different startups in China, but I guess the question is, you've started AppBoost, and how did you fund it? Did you fund it with your own money? Or did you fund it with outside VC? Or how did that go?
Well, we were a bit lucky because, number one, we had some money. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of money, but we had some money. So we took whatever that we have, because I think the model that I always think should work is that when I created a business, maybe also because of the fact that I've actually done 3 startups before, right? I always wanted to do a startup that I think I could make money, right, almost immediately. And that was a model that I knew that if I start something, right, that I could almost, right, for sure, I can run it, and in no time I make money. So, and the model is different in comparison to what you're doing. I'm not doing an app development. It's really a model where I make arbitrage from helping my clients. So it's a model where I charge an agency fee, like an advertising agency, because the model is very clear, and we make money from day one. So there is no need to, right, to really go and raise money. I mean, the model is completely different from your model. You know what I'm saying? So, but in my past experience, right, I actually run a business and then went and raise money. So raising money always depends on, you got to always think, why do you need money in the first place? Like in our current business model, we don't need money, because our model has always been on fulfilling a requirement. If we fulfill that requirement, someone will pay us. So as a result of that, right, it's self-sustainable.
I see. Well, let's talk about your model that is actually self-sustaining. So I think some people here may not be aware of exactly what you do. So it might be good to just describe briefly about what your model is and how you are actually making this work.
Now, I'm a performance-based marketing agency. So what I do is that I talk to a lot of app developers. I talk to app developers like yourself, right? You have an app that you want to target the American market, right? And some Brazilian market and a European market. And what you do is that, what you do best is that you do app development, and that's what you do best. But in terms of marketing that stuff, right, promoting it to that specific market, right, that's not something that you do on a day-to-day basis. And even if you want to do on a day-to-day basis, that's not what you're good at, right? So you then come and look for me, right, App Boost, right, who helps you, right, who helps you to actually address that. So we have the expertise, right, to help you to come up with a campaign plan, right, how to target those markets, and then effectively, right, driving downloads and of course driving users. So that's what we do. So and what we have done was in return, right, you will pay us, right, an agreed fee, right, for helping you to run the campaign.
And you do this only for Chinese companies to
Mainly,
go abroad, or is it just in China, for the Chinese market itself?
Mainly for Chinese company who's targeting the global market. In fact, to be honest, I don't even do local market, because the local market, there are already a lot of Chinese companies doing it. China is a market where I think, right, is that you got to find your niche, because the entry level to any games, any sectors in China is very high, because you are up against companies like the Baidu, the Tencent, and Alibaba. So the barriers are very high, and they have access to everything. They have access to channel, they have access to money, they have access to literally everything they can have access to, including government. So we're really targeting on what we think, right, where we have our strength, and our strength is to help them to target global markets, because we know where the market is, and we know where are the users, and where can you drive one of the top quality users from the network. So we understand that.
Okay, well, so a lot of people here may be interested in going into China from Korea, let's say, and then expanding the service there. A lot of the times, we don't even know exactly how to even start that conversation.
Right.
So for those types of companies who are interested in going abroad, they may be actually having a service here, or they may not have a service in Korea, but they do have people here that they're starting with. How do you then advise them to pick that niche of service, or how do you even start thinking about expanding, because China is a humongous market, right? And being able to kind of expand into China is fairly important. So how would you do that?
Now this is my thinking, right? Now if you want to even tackle China, I think before even tackling China, right, your product, right, or your business model has to be so successful already. So meaning, you don't try and tackle China when you're really developing your business, when you're testing a model. You are really going to China when your model is proven. So meaning, I would give an example, right? Like assuming like a product like Kakao, right, who is very proven, right? At least they are in a position to think about it even though it's not going to be easy, because they are up against WeChat, right, Tencent.
Right.
And as you know, Line who has actually got into China and got blocked after, a year. So the landscape is such that if you want to get into China, right, you have to make sure that your model is already a proven model and already a successful business. So I'm not trying to paint a bleak picture of China, but what I'm trying to say, the access, right, the channel into China, right, I think should be a war. If you want to fight that war, right, I would think that you will fight that war when you're really so successful outside China.
Right.
But even if you look, and the other model is that another model that I think, right now, if you look at some of the gaming companies in Korea, many of the gaming companies, right, what they do is that they work with some of the local Chinese distributor on distribution of their product. But most of the time, at least, are based on already very successful product in Korea. So I think that model will work. And using China companies, right, as a way to distribute your product.
So just so that I understood you correctly, just trying to go into China as a test market is probably not a good idea. Two is that if you are going to go in when you actually have a very strong, proven model that works somewhere else so that you can actually make sure that it does that. And then three is that if you are going to be going into China, partner with somebody in China to make it more successful.
You have to, now once you have a successful product, right, then finding a good partner in China isn't going to be a problem. But if you're going to come in entirely on your own, raise money from VCs and then come and compete, right, and then I think that's really difficult, really difficult. I came from a company where even a company as big as Google even has to stumble into a company in a country like China. Not because Google isn't a good company, it's the best company, and I'm sure John would agree with me on this. Right? It's perhaps the best company that I've ever worked. But the reality is that it's a very tough terrain, and not only that you need to have the best product, you also need to have people who will agree with you to run it the Chinese way, right? And the fact that because people could not agree to run the Chinese way, and there are things that you may not agree, and these are the country's policy, right? And country policy always outrules whatever that you think may be right outside China. So even a company as big as Google, right, is having a very difficult time in China. In fact, all the services on Google, every single services that used to be that we were able to access, even on an intermittence, now is completely blocked already. So there's no Google services in China. So if you want to travel to Google, there's no Google services, unfortunately, right? And not only Google is having that difficulty. Any American company, right, from eBay, from Amazon. Amazon is the one that's still operating in China, but they're on a very small scale, right? So from eBay, Yahoo, name them, even Facebook, Twitter, they're not in China. So the reality is that, right, as of now, there isn't many companies who are really making a lot of traction. So you really have to think hard, right? Do you have a good value proposition? Are you ready? And at the same time, very important, right? Finding the good business partners. If you find a good business partner like Tencent, right, to help you drive your business, there's a great probability that you may win. But it's also not easy because if you take, I would take a case study, right, that Groupon actually went into China with Tencent a couple of years back, and they had a JV, and subsequently, right, 1 year down the road, right, Tencent decided that they are better off on their own. They created their own version of Groupon, even having, right, a JV with Groupon. So that is the kind of difficult landscape we are talking about. So even your partner can even screw you up,
Wow, that's not very cool.
So, but that's a reality. That's a reality of the business, right? So partnering, having access to Ali and say, let's partner Alibaba. Great, it's not easy because they are competing. All these big internet companies. The competition now is really between Tencent and Ali. Alibaba and Tencent are competing head-on every single sector, everything, payment, commerce, games, everything that you can think of, they're competing. And to them, right, winning is everything. They cannot afford to lose, man, because losing that piece, right, is going to impact their business.
Well, so let's talk about this Chinese way. So you mentioned something about all these companies coming in and they're not able to compete because they don't, they may not operate in the Chinese way. So what is that Chinese way?
Well, from my perspective, Chinese way is that if there's a one word that I would describe, it's ruthless.
Wow. Okay.
Ruthless, really. They don't, the way they will run out. Number one, American companies, right, and European companies, they have ethics, right? Google has got great ethics, right? Everything is, don't do evil, right? But in China, right, everything could be evil, but the fact that you don't do evil, right, you get now. So Baidu is actually a competitor of Google, right? The reality is that, so if Google choose not to do evil and Baidu choose to do evil, right, today look at their market cap. I mean, look at their market share, right? 90 versus 1, right? So if you are prepared to jump into this market, right, you got to think beyond. I'm not saying that ruthless is bad. I'm not saying that, don't do it's bad. What I'm saying is that in order to win, right, you have no choice, right, but to adopt that way. Now, look at a company called Xiaomi that is already, eating into or even surpassing, right, Samsung already in China. A company that's 4 years old, right, 0 revenue 4 years ago. Today, right, doing 60 billion in turnover, 4 years. And the guy who's running this company is smart and at the same time very ruthless, right? So you need to understand, if you want to win in this game, right, you have to be so agile, so flexible, and willing to change all the time. And if you think the way that Xiaomi has run its business, very agile. And they do all kinds of stuff that you may not even think of, right? They run flash sales, right? They said, I'm doing flash sales. I sell 10 million products, right, within the next 5 minutes, right? How can you validate that stuff? You can't validate, right?
Right.
They would have stick that stocks to someone else, and then I've done $10 million. So all these numbers, the problem with China is that a lot of data are not very reliable because there's no way that you can verify them. But the Chinese people, right, they will use numbers, right, to validate their business. Xiaomi is one example.
And it could be a complete lie.
It could be. Could be, right?
Wow.
But the reality is that, we all believe in those lies, right? And people love to, oh shit, someone bought 10 million, so I'm going to buy tomorrow, right? So a lot of time, right, when you look at a lot of businesses are being run in China, from my perspective, is that you got to mix. Yeah? You must be able to adapt so quickly and change so quickly. And only when you can adapt and change. And if you look at Ali and Tencent, they are changing very quickly. And that's why they're winning. And that's why that most of the other companies, right, are finding it difficult to catch up. And for them, right, winning, because winning is everything, they will do everything to win, including being ruthless.
So let's kind of switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about then getting funding, right? So Chinese companies obviously have a lot of money, and they're now going outside of Korea or outside of China to start funding some of these companies. One, what's your advice on that? And especially if they're going into China market. And is there something that we should be watching out for or kind of at least think about when we're doing such conversations?
What are you saying?
Because
what was the question?
The question is about, like, okay, so let's say, a lot of these companies, Chinese companies, are coming out. And let's say it's Tencent, or it could be a Chinese VC. They come in and they're actually looking for investment opportunities and now outside of even China mainland, right? And let's say they come to Korea and say, hey, look, I'm going to start giving you X dollars or X, won. Would you now come with me to China to start working in China? I mean, what's the type of things that the entrepreneurs need to think about when these situations come up?
Is this money coming from the VC specifically, or coming from the companies themselves?
So let's just talk about both of them, but let's start with the VC.
I think VCs, it's slightly, well, if you're coming from company, right, I think you'll be more careful, right? Because a lot of Chinese companies are using money to buy what you have learned over the years, right? From that perspective, right, I think when you're talking to companies, right, you got to also try to figure out what is your objective in taking position in your company or even investing into your company. Because I think a lot of Chinese companies, what they're trying to do, right, is to learn about, if you look at Tencent and Ali, right, they're investing in a lot of companies. And a lot of times the investment are never majority. Yeah? Most of the time is between 10 to 20%. 10 to 20%, right? Now, 10 to 20% from my perspective, right, is literally to learn about your business, right? And see whether, how it would complement them and how they could copy you as well, yeah? So I think when you're talking to companies from China, I think you need to see what is your objective behind it. But if it's VC driven, right, I think purely, I think, you know, they are here to make money, right? They are here to make money. I think when someone wants to invest from a Chinese, because right now there are lots of companies, lots of VCs, local VCs in China who has got lots of money. There's no shortage. The only thing that's shortage is, I think, in China is that there's a shortage of good ideas. Lots of talents, lots of people coming up with great ideas, right? But there's a shortage, right? So that's why there's a need for a lot of these companies that's now looking outward, and all over, including Korea as well. I think now you see companies like Tencent and also Ali investing in the U.S., buying up gaming companies and also acquiring into a film company. So I think this is going to be a trend moving forward. But I think when you start talking to some of these companies in China, you got to be very I'm more concerned when you're talking to the smaller companies. Not so very when you're talking to the bigger one.
Not so, okay, so just to be right, not too worried when you're talking to big companies, but be careful when you're actually talking to smaller companies, smaller scale companies. I see. And then VCs are obviously easier because they only think is financial returns at that point.
At ROI,
right. And then now in terms of reaching out to these or finding out about different VCs, how do you actually advise entrepreneurs to be able to do this? So let's say I feel like I'm very successful in Korea and I need to be able to go out to the markets, including, and it may not be for just China, but it could be East Asia, Southeast Asia, and you're looking for funding to go out.
Right.
What are the typical things? I mean, and obviously with China having a lot of money to invest, you may be talking to them, right? So how would you even start talking to them? And how would you actually find out about their background, reputation? All that stuff matters, right? When you're looking and finding an investor.
I mean, when I look for a VC, right? No, if I'm looking at a stage where I'm expanding outside Korea and going into a market like China, even Hong Kong or even Singapore, right? I need to access a couple of things, right? If I'm going to look for a VC, right? Am I looking for money to expand, or am I looking for strategic VCs, right? Who has got access to market because of some of the companies that they are also investing as well. More likely than not, right, I would want investors, right, who have already, number one, companies who have actually, VCs who have actually invested successfully, right? They have actually have great ROI. Number two, right, I always like the VCs, right, who have also invested on some of the other companies, right, that I could have access to those market or even to those users, right? So most of the time when we bring some of the VCs to talk to us, right, we usually want to bring them VCs who have got access to a lot of different segments of business within the internet business. So at least when you talk to them, right, not only they can give you money, right, they can also give you access to some of the user or some of the expertise, right, that you have within the investment. So that will be the factors and also points that I will be looking at.
So if you were to kind of reach out to them, just look at if we were to start looking for contacts and started looking around, I guess you would start looking at the current investors and then see if they actually have or know someone else who they can be introduced to. And then actually from that point on is figuring out whether it makes sense to look at someone who can help you get access to the market or have already invested in companies that have customers or entry into the areas that you want to get into.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, like companies like VCs like Sequoia and also KP, right, who has a very entrenched. They have done several investment, successful investment in China, and because they have invested across, right. So these will be the good VCs, right, that you should even reach out because of the numbers of I've seen, especially KPs and Sequoia. They have got a lot of very successful returns of investment from what they've invested over the last 10 years.
All right, so let's kind of also then switch gears again and talk about your other startups. We briefly spoke about your App Boost and why you started that. It makes sense because that was post your Google experience as the head of Google Mobile. Now, prior to that, how many companies did you start, or how many companies did you run?
In total, I've done three.
Okay.
But this was, well, also because of my age, right? Now, I've actually done a startup when I first graduated from university, right? I had so much fire in me that I said, the first thing I wanted to do after coming out from university was like, I don't want to work for someone else because I think working for someone else, it's like a waste of my time at that time, yeah. I was so young, so naive. And I started my first company, right, running, this was back in the 90s, early 90s. There was no internet then. So it was really a trading business. Of course, with little experience, with being naive, right, I literally just lost my business, man. I literally just lost everything. Started for 9 months and it was a total failure, right? And then came back out to work again. Back in this was like in 94, 95, came back out and worked for an advertising company. I said, I have no money, I have to start all over again, man. I worked for an advertising company. 94, 95, I worked for a year, and I said, suddenly I felt, after a year, the itch came back again. And prior to that, right, after the first failure, I said, I think I should just give up doing business. I should just work for the rest of my life. Having worked for a year, the itch came back again, and said, hey, Alvin, you have learned something about advertising. You got to start doing advertising because why work for someone else? So in 94, 95, I came back out again and said, I got to do advertising, man. And that was the only thing I knew because I've learned that business for a year, right? And I came back out and said, let's do it, man. I found two founders, two other partners, and three of us. We, came up with some money and each contributed a Macintosh, and I came up with some sales pitches and sales customers, and three of us like, let's rock and roll. So it was really simple, with no business model. The business model that we had was like, let's meet some customer and make some money.
Nice.
So these were the good old days, right? And what happened was, I ran the business for a year, and after a year I said, it was easy to raise from 0 to 60, which is like 1 to 6 months. So within the 6 months, right, we could see traction. So we were very excited, right? Wow, we won the first business. 6 to 12 months, right, we won more business, right? Then came the reality of life. Winning business is easy. Keeping them is so damn hard, man. Because on the second year, we start losing customers. Because we were so good at winning them, but we were so poor at maintaining them. So again, we will start losing. So running the business for 18 months, I said, this is a lousy business. Because why? This is totally not scalable. Right? Totally not scalable. It was already so hard to win business and even harder to keep them. So I decided after 18 months, right, this was like at the really beginning stage of internet, and in 97. And in 97, right, all I knew, the only thing I knew with PC, right, was to like jumpstart the PC by plugging the plug and then switching the computer. That's all I knew, right? And I was playing with a product at the time. It was a product called a free telephone. It was a simple software that sits on your PC, and you can log in, right, and talk to someone else, right, from anywhere on earth, right. You have no knowledge of who are they, but you can chat with them. So this was the idea that came about. That I came up with the idea of starting a company doing internet telephony. This was in 97, internet telephone. So of course today, right, it's VoIP, right? But this was in 97, 98, right? In 98, the internet was like, if you have to connect to internet, you have to switch on your phone, right, and your PC and log on, right? Takes you at least 45 seconds, right, to connect to a 9.6K modem.
Wow, 9.6K. I don't think anybody's ever experienced that here except for a few people.
How many people know what a 9.6K, right?
We're not talking about like 9.6 megabytes. We're talking about kilobytes.
9.6K, right? And
wow.
then we got upgraded, and finally we had ISDN 64K, right? So this was the good old days, right? And so what happened, to cut the story short, right? I got the idea. I went and worked with some people to create right now. Even at that stage, right, with the little knowledge I had in internet and also technology, right, I had an idea. And what I did was I went and looked for people to help me, right, to create the platform. So in a year, right, within a year, I actually came up with a platform that became the first internet telephone service in Malaysia.
Wow.
Wow. And then I started creating that product and replicate that product in many countries around Southeast Asia, providing it service to do international termination. So that was a product that I started, and that was a business that I kept on, and it was a very profitable business from day one. And of course, then we went on to look for VCs and investors that helped us to went into second round and before it went public. This was back in 2005 before we exited the business.
Wow.
We exited in 2005, 2004.
So where did you even come up with the idea? Just because you had internet, no one just comes up and says, okay, you know what, I'm gonna do voice over IP, right? So I mean, it was like it must have come from somewhere. Where
Yeah, it was simple, man. I was playing with the product, right? And I think back in those days, right? Why idea creation was a lot easier for me because there was little legacy. There was no legacy. I don't even know what was internet, man. I don't even know what was the implication of internet at a point of time. All I knew was there was this connection that I could make through a 9.6K modem, right? That I could have access to the world. That I could use this access, right? And at that time, international call was so expensive that if I can put a connection here and drive this connection to the US, right, and drop the call, right, that would be a great idea that would be a great service for lots of people. So not having the legacy, I don't even know how to like put a network together, and I was trying to create a global network in my mind. But there was nothing stopping me because I was young, I was naive, right? All I had was, I thought, if I can put this together, I can put up like a mini telecom service, right? And all like that. It was exactly what I did. So it was a small company, and we actually drove it into about, I think at the prime when we sold the company, we had about 1,000 people.
wow.
So this was a. I think if you compare to now, I think these days, right, it's a lot harder because there's too much legacy. The problem that I have right now these days is that whatever that I do, right, I start to think back, hey, I have so much data, so much insight. Should I do it? So I think when you're younger, right, with little legacy, with all this, it's a lot easier because you don't think so much. Just do it, right? Nowadays, right, before you do it, right, you got to think a lot more.
But then when you don't think, and then just as what you did right after college, you tend to also fail very easily, right? So if you were to kind of advise these young entrepreneurs to figure out like, okay, if I were to do something, what should I do? Would you recommend them to jump it and actually fail and learn from the experience? Or would you say, hey, look, you got to actually learn something first before you enter in? Because those are a lot of questions that I get frequently from other people as well. So how would you answer that question for those?
I mean, in those days, it was a lot easier because there was little information. These days, right, when there's abundant information, right, if you want to do something, right, you got to make sure that you find out enough, right, to before even deciding whether you want to jump into whatever you can do. Like if you do mango plate right now, you got to dive into and find out sufficient information about the market, right? Sufficient information about the competitor, sufficient information about the need and the requirement before even diving into the business. So number one, knowledge of the potential, really understanding the potential. It's important. Right? In the past, we don't even have it, so it was really based on luck. So we were lucky the timing was right. And number two, I think you need a team. I think what made us successful then, right, was because we were lucky that at that point of time, I was talking to a few right people. That there was one person who said, Alvin, you don't worry about technology, man. I'll put that together. And then I was talking to a guy who is on the products, and he said, don't worry about product, man. I will put the product roadmap together. So you just have to focus on driving sales, man, and managing, the investors. So finding the right team, right, of people is important because imagine this, right? If three of you are coming from the marketing side, trying to develop a technology product, right? Where's your skill set, man? I mean, there's going to be a mismatch. I think there's no doubt that you can actually recruit someone. You can recruit a CTO, right? But if your dependence on your company is on a CTO that you employ, right, that's going to be very risky. So finding the right team of people, right? And of course, what is the number of people that you should find, right? Find a small team, not a team of 9 people as partners, man. Find a decent site, maybe 3 people. 2 is the best, actually. 3, not it's still okay. I think 4 is a bit too many already. So try to have a founder that can, that can ride with you at least, right, for the next few years. You need one. You can't work on your. There's no way that you can run the business on your own. So the right product, know your product well. The founders, right, your partners, your partner in crime. And thirdly, I think very important, the business model. A lot of people, right, when they think of an idea, fantastic idea, but never know how to do monetization. Many people, when I talk to a lot of some of the accelerator, some of the people at the accelerator programs, like great idea, but totally forgotten how to even look at monetization. They had some idea about business model, but I don't think they think hard about it. And I think when you look at all the successful business, right, it's all about having a very clear business model. You may not drive monetization now, but that business model has to be very clear. Because if you don't know how to even make money, right, how do you reckon, right, your investors, right? How are you going to convince an investor that you ever make money? So the 3 things I think is very critical.
Okay.
Knowing the product, knowing the business, right? The right partner, and meaning the team. Of course, the business model.
Right. Okay, great. So we're also running out of time, and I know people here also wanted to ask questions. So I'll ask you the last question about, just any other kind of last-minute advice for young entrepreneurs, especially if they're looking to go to China. And then,
I don't want to sound that it's a dead end China. No. Don't get me wrong.
right.
No, you got to be really prepared. A lot of people always ask me, the Chinese companies say, I want to go to the States, man. I want to go to the States because States is really important. It's an important market. I want to win. I said, please try and learn and understand the American market first. It's a very sophisticated market, right? If you have to fight a war, right, US can be your last market. I even tell that to Tencent. I even said, we should, because when Tencent was doing the campaign running through Google and WeChat, right, they said, now we were having a discussion and saying, when should we really put money, right, and promote WeChat in the US? So what was the conclusion? The conclusion was, right, if there was a war to fight, US will be the last market. So so go ahead and conquer everywhere else first. And when you win, right, maybe you can, start thinking about how to win in the US. So I think it's the same thing for China as well, right? You got to ask yourself, why China? Don't think just because, it's a 1.4 billion people, man. I want to get into the market.
That's a lot of people, though.
Right?
It's really hard to miss that one.
It's one. If it's a buck, right? If it's a buck, and I'll win big time, right? But the reality is that everyone is fighting for their $1, man. There's going to be 1.4 billion people thinking how to fight for the $1, right? And what makes you think that you're going to win at $1? So if you think that so think hard, right? Do you need to get into that market? And if you need to get into it, are you really equipped? Equipped from a product point of view, equipped from a team point of view, equipped from a financial point of view. Are you ready? You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to say, forget about China. No, I'm not. There are some success stories, right? Look at some of the gaming company in Korea. There are lots of gaming's product is an export from Korea. But how do they do it? They didn't go to China and say, let's build a gaming business in China. They work with Tencent. They work with Sundash, with some of the top gaming distribution companies. So this is a model. So meaning, right, if you need to jump into China, right, you got to ask yourself, are you ready? And if you are, right, what's the model? Right? There's no point diving into the market and saying, hey, I need this market because it's 1.4 billion, man. I need to have this business model because VCs is going to give me more money. VCs are not going to give you more money just because you have a China plan, right? So I think if you got to really ask yourself, are you ready? And if you are, right, then have a clear business model how you're going to get into the market. Not an easy market. Most of the American companies, internet companies, none of them has been successful, right? I'm not trying to paint a big picture of China, but the reality is this, none, right? So if you want to jump into, but I can tell you there's some who's really making some traction now. There's a company called Evernote. Evernote, I'm sure some of you use Evernote.
I'm sure everybody
Evernote is a very successful company in China. A lot of Chinese people actually think Evernote is a locally made product.
Wow.
So if you can convince, if you're so good to the point that you can convince the Chinese people that your product is like a local product, right, you'll win. But Evernote is actually an American product, made popular in China, and people in China thought it was actually locally developed. So that's one example. Uber is another example as well. But they have a good start, but I'm not really sure whether they can sustain. Because why? Because once a local company comes and attack the market, right, and dump money to win the market, they may lose out. But they have a nice start, right? So I hope that Uber isn't going to end up like me when I started my advertising company. Start well and ends badly. You know what I'm saying? Right? So China, there is some success story, right? But you really have to ask yourself. Like I think Mango Play, I was telling June, I said, if you want to get into market, if you have to compete with a big giant like Tianping, you got to think hard, right? How you can compete with them. And if you're going to get into an area now, because I think personally, from my angle, now Tianping is like a directory. If you make search more smarter, right? If you make things a lot more different, right? More intelligent, right? Then maybe you have an edge. So I think before even thinking of getting in the market, right, ask yourself, why do you even need to be in that market? Are you good enough? Evernote has done a good job. Right. That's one example.
Okay. Great. All right, so I'll open up to the audience for any questions. So there's one over there.
Oh, I got a picture too. Very nice. Wow, I feel like a celebrity. Got a picture here. So you talked a lot about getting a business started and running. So what are your tips for making sure that once you've gotten off to a successful start, how do you make sure a business model is sustainable yet agile enough to change directions when the environment changes?
Well, that's business, isn't it? So that's business. But now, in a difficult market like China, right? You really need to reevaluate your business model all the time. Now, when I run my business in China right now we're competing. Now, even Omnicom is a big company. We are competing with a lot of local Chinese companies who has grown so much, right, in China. And their model is consistently changing. Not changing in 5 years, they change every year. They change every year so that they can also kick our ass as well all the time. So, if you need to compete with them, right, you need to evaluate your business model every now and then and get people to find out what these people are doing. Besides just looking inwards, right, you got to look outward as well. Look at what they are doing. And sometimes, right, we actually pick some of the good ideas, right, some of the stuff that they have engineered, right, and we learn from them. And we, in fact, right, we took the same idea, right, and we improvised on them, right, and changed them to our advantage. I think in a difficult market, difficult and challenging market like China, right, you need to evaluate your plan all the time. So instead of doing like 2 years, right, do 1 year because everything is accelerated. In our market, everything is accelerated. So instead of like having a 5 years plan, right, you chopped up your 5 years plan, right, into every 6 months and see whether it's working and continue to get better, right? And make sure, because if you're competing in a market that's so competitive with so many competitors, right, you need to make sure, right, that you're always ahead and have very short business plan. I think that's one way that I would do, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now.
Okay, there's a hand in the back.
Going back to the question, Evernote, is it on?
I don't
Yes,
think
I can hear you.
But no, you gotta actually turn it on. But if make sure it's on, please.
But
Yeah.
you are actually loud enough. I can hear you from here.
Technology. Back to the example of Evernote in China. you mentioned that the fact that people mistakenly think it's a local company make people more willing to use it, which I find interesting because I know in other areas in China, not maybe so much tech or internet services, but whether we're talking about baby milk from New Zealand or auto manufacturers, actually foreign companies and foreign brands command quite a premium. So do you think that the internet industry is just an exception, and if so, for what reasons? That people are actually more willing to use local products in terms of internet in China? That's my question.
Very good question, because we help a lot of international brands promoting their products in China. And Chinese people, they love, if they can afford it, right, they would buy a foreign product all the time, if they can afford it. So that's why even product like the makeup products from China, from Korea, right, are so successful in China because they are deemed to be imported products, right? But for internet, it's different, right? Internet is different because it's another service, right? And the problem is that anything that's exported right now, if Evernote is a service that's being resided, say in the US, right? And I'm sure, have you heard of a thing called the Great China Firewall? Yes. Now, if your product is actually residing in the US or even in Korea for that matter, right? Accessing that service, even though it's an imported product, right? It's going to be like the user experience is going to be so poor, and the quality is like worse off than a local product. So suddenly, right, your imported product like Evernote, right, is residing in the US, right, suddenly deteriorates because you didn't localize the product. So one form of localization is to have your server, being put in China. So if you co-locate that in China, your service gets better. But the reality is that Chinese people, once they see a service, right, copying is like a magic for Chinese people. They copy iPhone, they copy everything. If they can copy you, they will copy you as well, right? Right? So the reality is that they are so good at copying, and that's what they do. Because when you take 1.4 billion people, there are lots of people thinking how to copy, right? That's why copying gets so good. Right?
It's called the never note.
Right. Right. It's also a network effect as well because so the Evernote, I think why Evernote was so successful was when they came to China. I think they brought the entire service in China and they developed it from ground one to fit the Chinese market. So the Chinese people actually thought, oh, it's a locally made product, right? Not like most of the product is like, oh, it's an imported product like Uber, like Facebook, like Twitter. People know these are imported brands from the US. But Evernote they brought there because Evernote wasn't a very popular product at all. I think most people haven't even heard of Evernote at that point of time. So they actually localized it and created it right from scratch in China. Because a lot of people think what does it mean by localization? A lot of people think localization means you translate from English to Chinese. That's localization. Like, English to Korean, that's localization. But in reality, that's not localization. The look and feel, the usability, the user experience, right? So these stuff, right? I think Evernote has done a really good job. And if you look at the UI and all that, right, it's really tailor made, right, for the Chinese market. It has a Chinese version and a Chinese UI.
Okay, so yeah. Wow, that mic is just not doing that well.
Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you.
All right, so 2 questions.
Okay.
Talk about copy. So what great ideas are in China that we should copy? Because there are a lot of, what should we be looking at to copy from China? Because I was talking to John here, and John was saying there's some crazy stuff happening over there. And just in Korea, we used to copy stuff from the U.S., right? Groupon, Anypong, or this is not a bad thing. These are coupon. These are billion-dollar, great ideas. So, there's nothing wrong with copying. So, what ideas should we be copying from China? That's one question. And second question is, we hear about Xiaomi. Xiaomi, nobody in Korea knew about Xiaomi 2 years ago. We actually had a Bin Lin come here and speak at one of our events. Nobody paid attention to him. But now Xiaomi, you can't go a day without reading about Xiaomi. So, but we want to get some advanced, intel from you. What are other interesting companies in China that we should be looking at?
Wow. What should we copy in China?
You didn't think that
I've
you
never
could.
thought hard enough, right?
You're thinking about what should I copy? No.
No, I think if there was something that you can copy, right, you should copy WeChat. But WeChat. Now, I don't know how much you know. Probably you have heard of WeChat. Probably have used WeChat, right? But if you look deeper into WeChat right now, if you compare WeChat, right, WeChat has got tons of services besides gaming and all that stuff that Lines and Kakao is doing, right? If you look deep into WeChat and look at the services, right, besides payment, they have got wealth management, they have got air ticket, they even have, you can even, they have the integration with e-commerce because they own Jingdong, the e-commerce site as well. They have got group buying. They have got integration with the taxi app. They have got integration with the restaurant Yelp app as well called Dianping. They have got integration with the banks to buy wealth management products. Now, if you look from that perspective, right, I think this is really innovation, right? Many a times that people say, well, we are copying the American, they are copying this. WeChat is one company, right, that I think they have gone beyond copying. Now, I think it's high time that we should, everyone else should go and copy them. Yeah. And if you look at Taobao and Ali, what they're doing, have done in China, right? Now, if Amazon and eBay and all that are not so cocky, right, they should copy Taobao. Take that model and copy it. But I think it's all about, I think it's also pride as well. And maybe it's also because the business model. But the reality is that they've done so well. Right? They've done so well to the point that eBay, Amazon, and a few companies combined even smaller than Ali, right? So that model must be working, right? So if you ask me two things to copy, right, I will copy WeChat and I'll copy Taobao. Okay. Can we have a side talk on that one? What is the upcoming company? A company that's going public or company that's actually...
Any interesting company that has caught your attention? That people outside of China
I will. Yeah, I got to think a bit hard on that because I'm actually observing a lot of companies but they're all still very small startups. But I do like some of them, especially those that are in the areas of programmatic buying. Because it's a trend. It's one of the fastest growing area, and I think these are the areas that we are actually really eyeing because it has a great contribution to what we're doing as well. So programmatic buying is actually something that we are looking at, especially there's already a couple of good companies doing it already, and some of which has already been invested by VCs.
Great. So we'll take one more question from the audience, and then okay. And then I think we have to wrap it up. Yeah, that mic is just really awesome.
You want to take my mic?
Yeah, that microphone, it is really awesome. Yes. No, I don't think it's like a battery. I don't know why it turns off.
So you were saying that the U.S. and China might be the last battle to be fighting. Do you have any examples of other countries that might be good first battles to fight in?
You're talking about product from Korea going outbound, right?
Like launching a startup or...
I think you should try a small market. I think you should try a market like Singapore, market like Malaysia, market like Hong Kong, right?
There you go.
Where now, if you look at these markets right now, there is some similarity to Korea, right? Density. Try some small market, right? And especially Singapore is a good market because you only need one English to cover the whole place, which is English, right? Hong Kong maybe just Chinese, Cantonese, right? So tackle small market because now when you go into a small market, your cost of promotion is cheaper as well. The cost of entry is lower as well. Cost of screw up is also very low as well. Because you need to think, right, while there's success on the one hand, right, there's also the other side, which is when there's a screw up, right? So if you screw up in a small country like Singapore, right, I don't think it will cost you a big fortune. But if you screw up in a country like China, that's a huge screw up, right? So try a small country like Hong Kong. These are great test beds. Now, when we do advertising, helping some of the app developers to promote the app, right, we always tell them, test the small market. Let me try and like pick one market, say Singapore, right, and we then promote your product and get like 10,000 downloads, right? And we will from these 10,000 downloads, like, let's verify, right, what's your response, right, on your product. So even if you screw up, there's only 10,000 downloads. How much would it cost you? Not much, right? So your cost of entry is low. Your cost of promotion is low. I think that will be a great market to really start to test your product. Don't go into a big market first. It's too costly. And pick a country where one language like English, right, or English, Chinese could fulfill it. Pick an easy market.
All right. So I think that we have to wrap it up. But Alvin is here for another hour. So if you have other questions, please corner him. And now that you know who he is, you can ask him more questions. All right. Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it.